On July 2, 1881, a man was shot twice at a train station and survived. He would be dead within 3 months, not from the bullet, but from the 80 days of treatment that followed it, delivered by the best doctors money could buy. His name was James Garfield, the 20th President of the United States, 4 months into the job. The man who shot him was Charles Guiteau, a failed lawyer, failed preacher, and failed political operative who had convinced himself that a single speech he'd given during the campaign entitled him to a foreign ambassadorship. When the Garfield administration stopped returning his letters, Guiteau decided the president had it coming and bought an ivory-handled revolver specifically because he liked how it would look in a museum someday. On the morning of July 2nd, he waited at a Washington railway station. Garfield walked in to catch a train. Guiteau shot him twice. One bullet grazed his arm, the other cracked a rib and lodged 2.5 inches from his spine. As he was dragged away, Guiteau reportedly shouted that he was a stalwart and that Arthur was president now. That bullet should have been the end of the story, and by modern standards it almost certainly would have been. It missed every major organ. It missed the spinal cord. A doctor today would call it a survivable wound. Garfield's doctors in 1881 called it an opportunity. Within minutes, over a dozen physicians had crowded around the fallen president, and nearly all of them did the same thing. They took turns sticking their bare, unwashed fingers directly into the bullet hole, feeling around for where it had gone. This was standard practice. 20 years earlier, a British surgeon named Joseph Lister had published research proving that infections were caused by germs and that sterilizing your hands and instruments dramatically cut death rates. American medicine had, for the most part, heard about this and decided it wasn't worth the trouble. The doctor who ended up in charge was a man named Dr. Willard Bliss. Yes, that was really his first name. And he had a reputation for confidence that outran his competence. Bliss moved fast to make himself the only physician anyone would listen to. Over the next 80 days, he personally probed Garfield's wound with his fingers and unsterilized metal instruments, sometimes several times a day, hunting for a bullet he was certain he'd find if he just went in one more time. He was wrong about where it was, confidently, repeatedly wrong. Bliss had decided early on that the bullet had traveled to the right side of Garfield's body, toward the liver, and he probed that side relentlessly for weeks. The bullet was actually 2.5 inches to the left of the president's spine, sitting quietly below the pancreas, already sealed off by scar tissue, doing essentially nothing. When fingers weren't finding it, someone had a better idea. Alexander Graham Bell, fresh off inventing the telephone, had built a prototype metal detector, an induction balance device that could theoretically locate metal inside a body without cutting it open. Bell rushed to Washington and on July the 26th tried it on the president himself. It should have worked. It didn't, for 2 reasons. Garfield's mattress had metal coil springs underneath him, which threw off the readings with interference nobody had planned for. And Dr. Bliss only allowed Bell to scan the right side of Garfield's body, the side Bliss had already decided the bullet was on. The actual bullet, resting on the left, was never even offered to the machine. So for 80 days, Garfield lay in bed in the White House, and later in a cottage built for him by the New Jersey shore, while the wound his doctors kept reopening did exactly what a repeatedly probed open wound does. It got infected. What started as a 3-inch entry point became, by the doctor's own case notes, a suppurating internal channel running feet through his body, draining pus that had to be cleaned out daily. He'd weighed 210 pounds on July 2nd. By September, he weighed around 130. James Garfield died on September 19, 1881, 80 days after being shot. The bullet, it turned out, was never really the threat. His autopsy found the wound track had walled itself off. His own body had been quietly healing around the bullet the entire time, the way bodies do. What actually killed him was a burst artery near his spleen, almost certainly damaged by all that unsterile probing, on top of a body already collapsing from sepsis, malnutrition, and pneumonia in both lungs. Charles Guiteau, on trial for his life, tried an unusual defense. one that happened to be more medically sound than his prosecutors gave him credit for. He argued that he might have shot the president, but the doctors were the ones who killed him. The court didn't buy it. Guiteau was convicted and hanged on June 30th, 1882. Modern physicians who've reviewed the case largely agree with the assassin. With basic antiseptic technique, the kind Lister had already published, the kind doctors across the Atlantic were already using, Garfield almost certainly survives. Instead, 80 days of the era's best, most expensive, most confident medical care turned a survivable gunshot wound into a slow, preventable death, one bare finger at a time. If that sounds familiar, it should. Same channel, same pattern. The people in charge killing faster than the thing they were hired to fight, with total confidence the entire time. Subscribe and go vote in this week's poll before the next one.